Doctors. Have you ever wanted to refuse a patient? What did he or she do? Story 1. One night I rode my bike from the hospital. This was in a quiet and small town, so lived very close to the hospital. I see a couple on the side of the street arguing. Then suddenly he starts getting aggressive. She screams and runs into the street to stop a car, but the only car coming along won't stop, so it ends up just being me and that couple. Must have been tired after a long shift, plus the environment is so non-threatening, small town, summer evening with still lots of daylight, and I completely misjudged the situation. I stopped and offered the girl to accompany her to the ER, only a 5-minute walk, to get that lip taken care of. She hesitates and acts strangely, and I realize she's under the influence. At the same moment, I realize him approaching me. So I'm tall for a woman, but he's a really tall and strong guy. At this point, he's swearing at me, telling me how sad my parents would be after he was done with me. The last moment before he reached me, I jumped on my bike and raced away as fast as I could. At home, I called the police to go look after the girl. 2 weeks later, I do the night shift, and guess who's brought in swearing and threatening to end everyone? Stupid junkie guy. Apparently, he took too many sleeping pills and told his girlfriend, who called an ambulance. He then threatened and the EMTs, who promptly called the police. Then, of course, he threatened the policeman too. And they brought him to the ER, where everyone like that eventually ends up. I had been so scared when the first incident happened, and I had a visceral response when I saw him again. I really did not want to treat him. But this being a small-town hospital, I was the only one doctor in the ER, medicine, and I didn't really have a choice. So I had to examine him. I told the police what had happened before, and they stayed at my side the whole time. I vividly remember having to check his pupils and looking into his hate-filled junkie eyes. It made me want to run away so bad. I ended up committing him for being a threat to himself and others. Psychiatry released him 2 days later, and he probably came back to the ER when I wasn't there. Another ER doc committed him again, and psych released him again after 48 hours. It's just how the system worked. Security was terrible at this little hospital, and I ended up refusing to do night shifts without better security. As the hospital was very cheap, they found a med student to shadow me. He was 6 feet something, all muscles and an avid kickboxer in his free time. Junkie came back once, had an amicable chat with a med student, and as far as I know, never came back. I left the hospital soon afterward. Something has bugged me since that incident happened. The girl ran into the street in front of a car to stop it. Her face was all messed up. And the car was a guy maybe in his 30s. He stopped, but when she moved to the side of the car, he actually sped up and drove away. While I was being threatened for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I saw some people behind windows in the nearby houses that simply went away when I pleadingly looked at them. I tried to flat down the maybe 3 or 4 cars that drove by, and not one would stop. There was this big junkie guy obviously threatening me, a scared young woman with a bike, in the middle of the road and the girl on the side of the road. She wasn't badly hurt. At some point, she kept shouting at me and her boyfriend, and all those cars just drove around us and away. Nobody would stop and help. People suck sometimes. But yeah, boo for junkie patient, yay for med student who doubles as kickboxer. That med student has some racket going on. Send him to the hospital while kickboxing. Stitch him up and bill him for the service. Lather, rinse, repeat. Story 2. I worked in a GP's surgery for a while, and I know one of them has transferred at least 3 patients. 2 guys, 1 girl, for declaring their love for her. Also a couple of ridiculously aggressive people, usually pain pill seekers, get kicked out. Bear in mind this is in a dodgy area of Belfast, and half the patients are former or current paramilitary members, so aggro means aggro. Oh, that reminds me. A different doctor in the same surgery had his coat stolen by a patient, and one of the other patients, who was a paramilitary member, who really liked him, made sure he got it back with everything in it, minus the money that had already been spent, and told him the thief patient would never bother him again. So I guess he had a patient refused on his behalf. Story 3. I'm on the other side of this one. When I was in my 20s back in the 80s, I was working for a really crappy factory. I was unloading a truck and pulled a groin muscle, and at first it did not seem too bad, and I just ignored it. One day it really flared up and I was kind of scared and hurting. So I went to a local clinic, and upon admission I was asked if it was work-related and said yes, and the admitting lady stared at me as if I had 2 heads. I went in to see the doctor and told him what was wrong, and the a-hole said, "You can't sue your company, you can go back to work tomorrow." That was it. No explanation of what was wrong or any attempt at helping, all delivered with a dismissive and contemptuous voice. At the time I was young and dumb and pretty used to being treated like crap at home and at work, so I just left and accepted that as my fate. I have matured a lot since then and don't take that stuff anymore. Ooh, something came in the mail today. I wonder what it is. It's Rufus Rugs!
Got him!
Now, hopefully after this ad plays, you too can say you got him! A rug from Rufus Rugs. Now me and the boys have been grinding non-stop 24/7, making one-of-one hand-tufted premium rugs. Now there's a chance you own a carpet that looks something like this. Let's just be real, it's time for an upgrade. And luckily for you, me and the boys from Rufus Rugs are at your service. We don't make those average cheap quality looking rugs. Nope, not gonna happen. Each one is handcrafted to perfection. No shortcuts, no robot assembly lines, and no dropshipping BS. Just pure rug grind. Whether you love anime, sports, cars, or anything else you can think of, we can turn it into a rug. So click the first link in the description and have your custom idea come to life. Story 4. I'm a nurse at an allergy and immunology clinic. Since we are not an ER, we have the right to refuse patients. Most people are asked to leave simply because they're being a-holes to the staff. People can get really angry and aggressive about their bills. In my time, I've seen maybe 5 patients terminated for their inappropriate behavior. More often, the most interesting folks who turn away are not even patients. For a long time, we had a nice homeless man who would come in at least once a week in a tattered fake UPS uniform and ask if we had any packages. We would always tell him we did not, and he would quietly take a fistful of lollipops from the front desk and leave. We eventually had to tip off the building manager as patients were complaining, but I think about him every so often. I truly hope that somewhere someone is providing him with candy. I'm not sure if I should laugh or feel bad at the thought of terminating patients for inappropriate behavior. Like, why did you turn off that patient's life support? Oh, they were being rude to me. Story 5. Some patients will obviously be difficult to care for. There are plenty of other doctors in my area. A patient might call and insist on talking with me before making their initial appointment, then not let me off the phone with multiple questions. I'm generally busy trying to get to the next patient. Worse, they will start to disagree with my over-the-phone answers. This has happened more than once, and I've said to them, I'm sorry, but I can tell you would be better off with another physician. At that point, they always back down and talk about how they've heard how wonderful I am, etc. But I let them know they need to call somebody else. The first time this happened, I had been in practice only a short time and had lots of openings in my schedule, so I was very hesitant to do it. But I was very glad that I did, and realized I had control over my life and my practice. Story 6. This is the other side of the coin, but as a teen, in the 90s, I was particularly entrenched in the whole grunge or punk look. I had terrible problems with ovarian cysts and had ongoing medical treatment for it. At one point, I was sent for an ultrasound, and the tech performing it started berating me, saying, "Your pain is obviously from all the scar tissue here from terminating your pregnancy," and kept making comments of the like. I was 16, in pain, and was horrified by what this man was saying to me. I had never had one. I realized later he had made assumptions because of how I was dressed and realized just how disgusting people can be sometimes. Story 7. I was a manager at a GP surgery. I've kicked quite a few patients off our list, the majority for aggressive, threatening, or racist behavior towards my staff or attempting to defraud the practice. I did, however, refuse to have a patient attend the practice, insisting that he was only ever seen in his own home. He was a convicted kitty fiddler who'd also been done for getting too close and personal with a girl the same age as 2 of my receptionists. He let loose in the clothes he stood up in, had probably not bathed since 1973, was permanently buzzed, and on the one time he drove to the surgery, messed with every wall, barrier, and car in the car park. Luckily, he was recalled to prison not long after he was assigned to us and was not alive for long after that, having refused treatment for sepsis. Wretched creature. Story 8. All the time. I'm on my break on shift right now and we've already thrown out 2 tonight. Aggressive idiots who don't understand they can't just get what they want. Every day we throw patients out here because, at least when I'm in charge, you don't get to walk into my emergency department and shout and be aggressive and horrible when there are sickly patients and kids who don't want to hear that. I don't care if you don't want to wait or if you messed up your stupid foot being buzzed. It could be busted to hell and back for all I care. If you're shouting and swearing in my face, you can go away. More doctors need this attitude, I feel. Dang, I thought that was kind of illegal. I get it though. If you would refuse dealing with a really aggressive patient, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Story 9. I'm a nurse in a hospital, so we can't refuse patients. We had one patient who was only there for a couple of days, thank God. He threatened to sue us every day. Every single person who came in the room he berated and called them incompetent. On the day shift alone, he went through 2 different nurses who eventually refused to continue to take care of him after a few hours because he was so awful. My manager ended up being his nurse and basically never left the room. She cleaned the room with the housekeeper and was in the room when he ordered his food, and when the doctors visited him, he still called the dietary people idiots for bringing him the wrong food, when it was exactly what he ordered, and threatened to sue the doctor for negligence. At one point, he was complaining that the hospital wasn't doing enough and the nurses weren't doing enough for him. My manager said she had been in the room all day and she said that they had been doing absolutely everything they could be doing. He said that it wasn't enough and they should be working harder to please him. He also constantly talked about how other hospitals in the area were way better, and our hospital was a crap hole that only hired stupid a-holes. He was mean and derogatory, and I wish we could have just shipped him off to another one of those better hospitals. Story 10. Just about any chronic pain patient. I know that people really do have chronic pain. Just because you are asking for pain meds doesn't make you a junkie. I know this on an intellectual level, but I still hate dealing with them. Here's a typical interaction. Me. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain you can possibly imagine, where is your pain? The patient replies, sitting comfortably, chatting amiably, 11. I respond, when I say 1 to 10, I mean that 10 is so intense that you're writhing, screaming in pain. You would end it all to end the pain. The patient thinks for a moment and says, 11, but I have a high pain tolerance. Or this typical discussion, patient. I really hate taking pills, but unless I take 120 Percocets a month, I can't function. I would do anything to get off these. Me. Well, there are some alternative things you can do. I gave a 20-minute discussion about yoga, acupuncture, massage therapy, chiropractors, physical therapy, and the anti-inflammatory diet, all of which are backed up by hard data and peer-reviewed studies. 1 month later, I ask, "Did you look into any of the things we talked about?" Patient says, "I was kind of busy. Could I get the Percocet?" Story 11. My friend's crazy wife was refused treatment by several medical doctors. She has borderline personality disorder, and maybe because of this or not, she's very rude. They examined and questioned her. She didn't like or agree with what they had to say, so she would storm out of their office yelling and swearing. He had to take her to several doctors until they found one who told her what she wanted to hear. Story 12. I'm a paramedic. I can't say this enough. The ER and calling 911 for an ambulance is for an emergency. Your chronic pain is not a 911 matter or an ER matter. You need to see a specialist or get a referral to a pain clinic. There is a difference between chronic back pain, gout, sickle cell crisis, or other chronic pain and acute pain that comes out of nowhere. Chest pain, abdominal pain, new onset back pain, those are potential emergencies. If you call 911 for your chronic pain, don't expect me to crack my box for you. And most ER doctors won't help you either. The ER doctors have access to a system that tracks all the prescriptions you've gotten, and they will know if you're a junkie or too lazy to see your specialist versus a legitimate new onset pain patient. If I'm out of Cinnamon Toast Crunch in the morning, it's an emergency for me. Story 13. Yes, although I didn't, I really dislike caring for a man who hunted mountain lions for sport and money. He used dogs with radio collars and baited traps. Not much sport in hunting a mountain lion who has gone up a tree to escape the dogs or who has his in a trap and can't get away. Still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. Of course, there are a lot of evil people out there we know about and some we don't. I definitely would not care for Dick Cheney if he showed up at my office. Story 14. I won't accept a patient until I do a meet and greet. If they're already on narcotics, are rude and demanding, or have a complicated psychiatric history, I tell them that I'm probably not the best physician for them. It saves a hell of a lot of trouble later. By the way, as long as it's not an emergency, physicians can refuse to see a patient at any time. It's unethical, but not illegal. Story 15. Not a doctor, but a paramedic. Had a patient in police custody for solicitation in my ambulance, about to transport. The patient kindly took her hand and did nasty stuff to it and said, "Don't touch me." She then took a swipe and hit my knee. I told the cop, "Have fun," and got in the front with my partner and peeled out of there. Who says "don't touch me" then proceeds to touch the person they said that to? They need all kinds of help. Story 17. Don't be a freaking a-hole to us at the pharmacy, else you get kicked out and your scripts elsewhere. We have kicked people out, mostly pain pill seekers are the biggest pain in the but we did 86 a guy who yelled at everyone all the time. Our pharmacy manager tolerates zero crap. It's hard not to become judgmental after all you deal with day in and day out is meatheads and seekers trying to forge scripts, get free pills, story time about this or that, etc. It isn't fair to people who honestly have a need for painkillers for real reasons. There are a lot of independent pharmacies here, but because of ours, we get about most of the city coming to us because we're open 24 hours a day and we're close to a hospital. I had a lady get mad at us for being open on Christmas and thought it was an outrage. I wanted to say, "Lady, you are the reason we're forced to work, because you couldn't go one day without a gallon of milk and a pack of smokes." Also, sickness and injury don't take breaks. Someone has to be there to take care of folks. I do hope that someday modern medicine and technology allows for people to live almost fully capable lives without disease and pain wrecking simple things. Story 18. Psychologist. Not being able to afford the $5 copay on the meds you need that keeps you from spending $200 or more when the lack of meds puts you in a hospital, but you can buy premium gas for your car, expensive food for your cats, constantly hoard arts and craft stuff that hundreds of dollars a month. Come back and see me when you display the prioritizing necessary to get your life in order. Otherwise, a complete waste of time. Story 19. It's pretty normal to decline a ride in the ambulance when it's obvious it's not necessary. It's the doctor's decision. In my country, Czech Republic, people started to call an ambulance whenever something small occurred instead of going to the ER. Why? Because they would have to pay a fee of 90 crowns there. Yes, America, you pay literally thousands of dollars in care, and here people won't even pay $3.05. Czechs didn't want to pay 30 korunas or $1 for a GP, so the parliament abolished it. Funny, huh? Story 20. My father is a doctor and a rheumatologist. He basically sees elderly people, but this one, she was insistent that she needed pain medication for her arthritis. Cute blonde in her 30s, her hands wouldn't open. She had crazy back spasms, she would click her words. My dad decided she was faking it and refused to give her anything. Mind you, he's also an ERR. She passed away. Raving, crazy, freaking mad, throwing jello at gators in the bathroom 3 days later. She wasn't hooked on anything. He misdiagnosed her. She flayed and danced on his table in a seizure and he couldn't fix her. She fell and that was it. She ended up having a brain tumor and that was what caused the seizure and hallucinations. Her sister came in a few minutes later thinking she was visiting a patient with life. She tried to hit my father with a syringe, swung it but didn't connect. He laid her flat, aka knocked her out with a fabulous jaw punch, and called the police on staff. So, did his dad get sued? Because I wouldn't have tried to hit him with a syringe, but I would have sued the ever-loving crap out of him in the hospital. Story 21. Vet here, so clients rather than patients. I wouldn't say that I fire clients often, but it has certainly happened before and will probably happen again. Usually it's with people who refuse to comply because they read something online, people who routinely waste your time talking about internet diagnoses, both huge time drains, just not worth the trouble, and people who refuse to have their pets properly vaccinated, posing a danger to the rest of the patients, and of course people with a history of not paying for treatment. We get pain pill seekers on occasion, but those are presumably rarer than in human medicine. Story 22. Sort of related. My office phone number is very similar to a pain management clinic's. I had the lovely opportunity to answer the phone of a very pissed off patient who was being refused service and could not understand why she called the wrong number. I could only imagine what the poor workers there experienced with this woman. In the 5 conversations I'd had with her, I was called a lying witch, told she will find where I live and have her ex-con boyfriend beat the ever-loving crap out of me, and other various versions of threats of bodily harm and insults. This went on for a week straight before she realized that I wasn't playing a trick on her, that she actually called the wrong number. Story 23. When I was a resident, we had a patient in the hospital who had bona fide Munchausen syndrome. One of the residents caught her rubbing brown stuff on her IV port so she'd get sepsis. She would be admitted every 2 to 3 weeks for a few days with some infection or vague abdominal complaint and monopolize her time and resources demanding staggering doses of opiates and $1 million worth of labs and imaging. We actually had meetings with our attending physicians to see if there was a way to legally refuse to admit her anymore, but we always did. When I was the on-call resident, I would spend more time taking care of her complaints than all of the other inpatients in the floor combined. I'm not sure if I should be surprised by how they even managed to let someone do that or why someone would go to those lengths. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy Doctors. What's something you had to explain that you thought was common knowledge? Story 3 was too good to be true. See you in that video.